Owen, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Great to see you. I see you a lot on LinkedIn, so it's funny to see you here on the Zoom call because your studio looks all too familiar from all of your posts.
Yeah, I think during the build of this studio, I was fairly under the radar until I built this place. And then I really had a big push on social media, just documenting more for me what was happening. But my network has grown massively over the past sort of 2-3 years just from documenting the build of this place.
Yeah, people love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can't believe how into it people are. I've got so many videos, and the intention is to put a really big sort of studio build video together, but it's just finding the time to do it. So at some point, I will put all that together to show people how it was all done and how, well, all of the problems that we had along the way, because these things never go as smoothly as you expect them to go.
As I like to do, I like to get the state of the state. I like to figure out, like, where are you at geographically and what do you consider yourself? Tell me about modern day Owen's life.
Okay, so I'm based in Staffordshire, UK. I'm in the West Midlands, probably tell from my accent, just north of Birmingham. Day to day, I work out of my own studio here. This is studio I built at my new home, so my time leasing and renting has gone, no overheads anymore. I class myself primarily as an engineer, but I feel a little bit more comfortable now using the producer term. That's something I never used to really like saying. I always saw myself as an engineer, but I've definitely evolved more as a producer the older I get and the more bands that I work with. And then alongside the studio, this more recently, I've started lecturing as well. So I also teach on music production programs at our local college.
Yeah, tell me about the area that you're in terms of, you say there's a local college. What is the environment like? What's the ecosystem like as it pertains to music and recording and that kind of a thing?
Okay, yeah. So I'd say I'm quite close to Birmingham. Sort of the train journey to the studio is only 20 minutes. So music is really big around here. We've got lots of venues in Birmingham. There's lots of studios, sort of from smaller studios up to mid-sized studios, I'd say. For your larger studios, it's still everything's down in London or a couple in Manchester, but we've got lots of kind of mid-sized studios around here. Sort of music-wise, very metal-based, as I guess you might expect from being near Birmingham. Lots of rock, lots of metal, but then we also have a lot of hip-hop and pop music. I generally work with sort of the heavier, rockier bands, but I do dip my toe in with a little bit of the pop and hip-hop stuff. Up to the north of me is Stafford, where I teach in the college. That used to be a university town, and there was lots of music there, but that's died down over the last few years, and there's not so much going on there. But like I say, because I'm so close to Birmingham, I kind of see myself as being part of that Birmingham scene, because that's where the majority of my work comes from. And when I'm not in the studio, that's where I spend most of my time as well.
Tell me a bit about constructing your studio and what was involved in that, and take us through the good, the bad, and the ugly of it.
I had a big commercial studio for years and years, and in about 2017, it just kind of ground me down being there 24/7, never had any time at home at all. I mean, now I've got this studio at home. I still don't go to the house much, but I've got the option to go up there if I'd like to. And I took the decision then to kind of let the studio go. I didn't want to be chasing that lease and the rent payments every month. And I went freelance, and I sort of had a bit of time then to reevaluate how I was going to approach audio. I lost the enjoyment out of it a bit, and it was more like a daily grind. We've got to make rent. We've got to get people into the studio. And I was like, I know this is all I want to do and all I can do, but how can we make this work and kind of get that work-life balance, as you talk about on the podcast all the time? So myself and my wife, we started looking for a property. We're like, the best thing to do here is to build a studio and get rid of the overheads, and that kind of takes the pressure off and can be a little bit more selective about the people that you're working with. So I went freelance for a couple of years whilst we searched for the right property, which took a long time. Obviously, find somewhere that you can call home and then also build a studio. There's not many places around really where you can do both of those. We've got an old Victorian house that we renovated, and then it had a load of land, and we're like, this is ideal. We can build the studio here. So once we found the house, this was pre-COVID. My studio building journey started off with me doing a whole lot of reading, a lot of talking on forums, and initially I was going to design the studio myself and do absolutely everything. The more talking I did and the more reading I did, I was like, actually, with this place, this I intend to be my studio forever, because I've had so many studios over the years. I've always known within 2 or 3 years I'll be moving to a different space. Whereas this one, I was like, I do not want to leave. Like, this is going to be my home for forever, or for as long as possible. So I started reaching out to studio designers then, and that was also quite a long process, because I had lots of different designs back. Some were way too expensive, some I didn't like the design. Some people you speak to and it's like, actually, I'm not sure we're going to work well together. And then there was a forum called the John Sayers Forum, which I think popped back up recently, which was a fantastic place for information about studio builds. And John Sayer was on there then as well, chatting to people. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. But someone reached out to me when I posted a design that another designer put on there and said, I've looked at your design. I don't think this is going to work for what you need. Never spoken to this guy before. He was like, look, can we jump on Zoom and have a little bit of a chat about the design and see what I think about it, what you think about it, and potentially I can come up with something that's more suitable for what you're looking for. So I met a guy called Paul Bishop. His company's called Wise Owl Acoustics, and like I say, this was just before COVID. He had a look at the design. We chatted about what we thought was going to work, and then fundamentally there was just lots of things wrong. It wasn't going to offer me the isolation that I needed. I knew that it wasn't big enough, but that's the only thing that came into budget. So he went away, drew up a design, and the first design he sent back to me, I was like, this is my guy. I was like, he's totally got what I'm trying to do with the studio. Speaking to him, like his understanding of like the amount of sound transmission loss that we need to achieve, but also create a studio that sounds good. Like, this is the person I want to work with. So it all went from there. It took us probably a couple of months to get the design exactly as I wanted it, so it'd work for me. And then it got into kind of the boring bits that take a long time, getting planning permission. So where I am is actually in a residential area. We have a lot of land and it's kind of far away from all of the houses, but obviously that poses a problem with planning permission. As soon as people hear there's going to be a studio near the house, they're like, oh no, what's going to be going on there? All of a sudden they think there's going to be lots of noise, people drinking, taking drugs. I don't think they realise that we're more worried about the noise than they are. And actually, it's quite a nice, pleasant day where we're just chatting about music and recording things. So finally got that through. Was a very, very long process. But because that took so long, COVID had now hit, and we'd priced up the studio on the price of materials pre-COVID. Everything doubled in price. The plan was I was going to get builders in to do everything. So went back to Paul. I was like, look, what are we going to do? And he's like, you can still do this. He was like, but you're going to have to learn to build. So I'm good. I'm practical with electronics, but building has never been my forte. And like, we've spent so much money now on getting the designs done, getting planning permission through. I was like, just got to do it. So I got a builder to come in to build all the exterior of the building, and then everything from the plasterboard skin from the inside did by myself. And again, with that starting during COVID with my wife's help, and we just ploughed through it and got it built. So the build was meant to take a year. I think altogether we probably took about 2.5 years, because we did everything on the inside ourselves, from building the big massive bass traps in the back of the room that hang from the ceiling to pulling the fabric over the walls, fitting the windows, absolutely everything.
What aspects of building it yourself did you find challenging? Not only challenging, but where did you make mistakes?
To be honest, there were mistakes made, but there weren't as many mistakes made as I thought there were going to be, because I had the guidance of the studio designer throughout. He was always at the end of a phone call. So if there was something I wasn't sure about, I'd ring him and he'd pick up the phone straight away and he'd be like, no, you need to do this, or we need to do that. So I can't think of any examples of mistakes off the top of my head, but it was a lot. Although it took a lot longer because I'm not doing this every day, the process was quite smooth because of the guidance that I had. And I think that was the big takeaway from building this studio. A lot of people contact me now because of the social media presence with the build, like asking for advice. And the best advice I can get is to get someone in your corner who can help you and tell you what the mistakes are going to be, how you should approach things, because it's going to save you a massive headache and save you masses of money in the long run. Looking back at it, if I'd gone with my original plan and I'd designed the place myself, this would have cost me 3-4 times the money and had been nothing like it is now.
So when you say 3 to 4 times the money, did your studio designer find places to save money, or was his design just that much more efficient?
His design was just that much more efficient, I think. And also, we worked to a budget to start off with. So he gave me what I could get for that kind of money. But then when we got into the build, because he's doing this all of the time, he knew where the best place to go and get timber from that was going to be cheaper than everywhere else, what the best option was to clad the building that was going to make it more cost effective. So this space, no corners have been cut whatsoever. Like, this control room measures up fantastically. The fresh air system is silent. All the rooms are climate controlled, but we managed to do it at the fraction of a price than going out and getting a company to do it all from the ground up. And without him, there is no way that, I mean, it wouldn't have been built this well without his guidance. I wouldn't have been able to get the materials at those kind of prices, and the design, my own design, would have definitely been nothing like this at all. I've built out lots of units in the past that have worked great, but this is on a completely different level to anywhere I've worked out of before.
Where was your designer geographically located?
So Paul was in Wales, and he was about, I think it's about 3.5 hours away. So there's lots of calls like this over Zoom.
Did he ever come out physically?
Yes, but only recently. So he came out in summer last year to come and measure all of the rooms. Again, I don't keep going back to COVID, but with this being during COVID, he kind of saw that now people were starting to build studios at home because of this thing that had happened across the world, so they could carry on working. So this kind of sparked something for his business as well. So from my studio, he's built Atmos studios. He's been out and built a ton of home studios, and the feedback from everybody was how incredible all of these control rooms sounded. And then I somehow ended up being the last one that he came to, which was the first one he built from the ground up. Up until then, he'd just advised on rooms or studios that were already existing and going adding additional treatment. So this was kind of something new for him. And this was a little bit of a test, if I'm honest. So I kind of had to take a little bit of a leap of faith going with Paul. But the conversations that we had, like, he made me so secure with his knowledge and that design. So like I say, when I saw it on paper, it was better than anything I could have even dreamed of myself. So I knew he was going to be the best guy to go with. So yeah, him being sort of 3 hours away wasn't an issue at all, because we're always on the phone or always chatting over Zoom. As I say, he came up, he's been and measured the room and loved the place. So that was good. It was a little bit worrying before he came. It's like, is he going to like it when he gets here?
We're going to have to naturally include his name and website, if there is one, in the show notes, because there could be a demand.
Yeah, I can pass on his details. He's actually moved out to Thailand just recently, and he's working for Gig Acoustics at the moment. But last conversation we had, he's still doing little bits of consultancy for studios and helping design people's studios at home.
Were you surprised at your ability to do this? Obviously, with him advising you clearly, but did you surprise yourself at all with your ability to just jump in and do it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the quality of the finish in here, I don't want to kind of blow my own trumpet because this is not something I was confident with at all. But I think because I was so invested in it and it's mine and I knew that I wanted to be here forever, there's probably a little bit more attention to detail than there would have been if I'd have got a contractor in to do it. So, yes, it did take me twice, three times as long. But I think kind of the detail is incredible. And I wouldn't have expected I'd been able to do that myself. But when it's your own thing, you just keep hacking away at it. And I was here from 7 o'clock in the morning till, I don't know, midnight most nights, just working and working and working. I mean, I had intended, but whilst I was building the studio, I was going to carry on recording and mixing. Um, Within about 2 or 3 months, it came apparent that there was no way I was going to be able to carry on working with as many people as I do usually. So I got a little bit more realistic about it. It's like, right, let's focus on getting this place done and then we can get back to hitting it again.
Obviously, you've got a control room. We could see that, or we know that. But what's the layout of the place?
So we've got a control room here. You go through the door. I've got a little kitchenette area. There's then a toilet, and then there's a live room. And then out of the front of the building, this was an additional add-on last year. We've got a big decking area and seating area. Because with this property, the whole idea of this studio was it was meant to feel a little bit more relaxed than anywhere I've been before. This is the first studio I've ever been to that had windows. So you look out, there's an orchard outside the window here. So it's like when people are here working, I want them to enjoy the environment, not just come in like this lovely studio. Like you're here for maybe 3, 4 days, a week, a month. Like let's enjoy being here. So the kitchen means we can make good coffee. If the sun's shining, we can go and set out the decking and chat, and everyone's nice and relaxed before we start working. So yeah, it's not a huge building. It's 9 meters by 9 meters, the whole plot, that we've
Mm.
kind of squeezed everything in there, and you've got everything you need here to be nice and comfortable.
What about ISO booths?
So we haven't got an ISO booth. I originally wanted an ISO booth, and Paul advised against that with it being smaller than studios that I've worked in the past. So we went for the kind of classic dead and live end in the live room, but the dead end is extremely dead. So it's like recording in a booth. So if we're looking for a dry vocal or we're miking up guitar cabs, I need that to be super dry down that end. And then the other end of the room, we've got lots of treatment there to make sure it's balanced. But then I've got a slate wall on the back as well to keep that super live.
Mm. What special considerations did you have to make in order to accommodate having light and having windows?
You can see this window here, it looks outside. To the right of me here, I also have another window. And if I was designing this myself, I would never have had a window either side of my listening position. So I was like,
Mhm.
that's obviously a no-no from everything we've read and everything we know about how sound travels. But the way you design the room, they're at an angle, so we're reflecting to the back of the room, and where the monitors are placed at the front, we actually missed those windows. So that was something that when he was designing it, I was like, is this going to work? Like he's telling me it's going to work, but I'm not too sure this is going to sound very good. But again, it's putting my trust in him. As soon as we got the windows in that first day, we got some monitors in and tried it out. It's like, sounds great. He was right. Like you
Hmm.
just got to trust the professionals sometimes.
Well, that's fascinating about your designer and the windows and the angles, because that would be a concern, I think, for most people. Let's transition a little bit. I want to get a bit of a background story on you to figure out like what has led up to this and the journey that's taken place. Where did you grow up?
Okay, so I grew up in a town called Northampton, and I lived there until I was about 12, 13. And then at that point, we moved to a place called the Isle of Man, which is a little island in between England and Ireland, with my dad's job. So although I spent more of my childhood in Northampton, I see the Isle of Man as being more of my home, because that's where I was a teenager and sort of where things happened as I got older. And that's the place where I really transitioned from just being into music to being into audio. In Northampton, when I was younger, I don't come from a musical family at all, but my parents are wild for listening to music, and they've always listened to modern music. I can remember when I was really small, my dad dropping me off with the windows down and Coolio coming out of the window, coming out of the car. At that point, I thought it was quite embarrassing, but now thinking about it, it's probably led a lot to my taste in music and kind of the way I work and my production decisions. When I was kind of 12, 13 in Northampton, or a little bit younger, started playing the guitar, started the way most people start, playing guitar, then moved to the Isle of Man, and that's where things sort of started to make a little bit of a change, moving over more into the recording and the audio world. When I arrived, obviously still playing guitar, kind of new group of friends, and heavily got into heavy metal, and that was kind of my life for a good 5 or 10 years after that. But that kind of led into working with a youth organisation there. So I started delving into doing little bits of live sound with them. They were building a studio on the island, so I kind of helped out with building that studio. At that point, it was when sort of music production and music technology qualifications were starting to come into school then, and they'd just started to run a music technology program at my school. This would have been when I was 16, and I was asked if I'd take this course and do that for the next 2 years. I was the only person on this course for 2 years, so that is kind of where I met the first person who really kind of nurtured me as someone working within audio. He taught me so much. Without him, I definitely wouldn't be doing this. He got me through that course, but he also had a little local studio. So when I wasn't at school, I'd be in his studio starting to learn how things worked. At the weekends, I'd be at his house working in the studio. His son was a fantastic guitarist, so that ended up with us being in a band. And yeah, this guy kind of really ignited the fire for the love of studios and audio.
I love that. That's great. And this was when you were 16?
Yeah, so that's when I was 16, so quite early for getting into a studio. Before then, like I say, I was always into music, and I've always messed about with things. Like I'd always be going and buying speakers from jumble sales or yard sales and wiring more speakers up around my room. So there's always a bit of a technical interest in audio as well as just listening to it.
When did you experience, the realization that, hey, I could do this for a living?
I played guitar, and then I met this teacher who kind of took me under his wing, but he instilled it in me from that very first day of doing that course. Like, you can do this for the rest of your life. This is something that you can make a good living from, and you can enjoy what you're doing most days. And
Most days.
um, yeah, so that was kind of always instilled in me. And like I say, I'm not from a musical family per se. They play, but my family all love music, and I've had very supportive parents throughout my career. From being in bands, they've always supported me, up to building studios. When I was 21, I think I built my first studio. They've always been very supportive with me, and they've never kind of said, look, it's time to go and get a real job now. It's like, you want to do what makes you happy in life, and if this is what you want to do, you need to throw everything into it.
Tell me about your first studio build.
Yeah, so after the Isle of Man, I lived there for quite a while. Problem with the Isle of Man is it's a little island, it's a lovely place, and I would have loved to have been able to stay there. But as someone working in audio, there's not too much of a career if you want to work with bands. There's a big film industry there, but I knew that I wanted to work with bands in the studio. So I managed to come over to England. I signed onto a university course here in Stafford, which is how I ended up being based here. And then when I graduated, when I was 21, I was like, right, it's time now to kind of get my own studio. Actually, I've moved forward a step there. I got a job in a local studio and worked up to house engineer for a couple of years, and then I broke free and built my own studio. So it's a bit like this one, driving around for months on end trying to find somewhere that's going to be suitable to set up. And I found a barn on a local farm that was being used as a practice room by some local bands. The guy who ran it as a practice room landed himself a job at a studio towards Birmingham. He's like, look, if you want it, you can take it because they're going to rip everything out. When I went in there, it was pretty run down. There's duvets stapled to the wall. It wasn't an ideal space. So that was kind of, then I started building, I guess. I said I hadn't really got any experience, but we did pull all that out and build in there. But it was really basic compared to this place. It was putting up a partition wall and a window in between the two rooms. And that's where I really started kind of cutting my teeth, learning what it was like working with people. Up until then, it had all kind of been within an educational setting, apart from bits of gigs here and there. And yeah, that studio, I mean, technically not the best studio in the world, not the best sounding studio in the world, but it was an amazing space for me. That I was there for a good probably 4 or 5 years, I think. Because it was out on a farm. Bands love coming there because you're out in the middle of nowhere, like surrounded by horses and sheep and all those kinds of things. And actually, some of the things that have been most played from my career have come from that studio, which was probably the most primitive, well, definitely was the most primitive studio I've worked out of.
But such great lessons, I'm sure, that you learned.
Oh, yeah, so much. I mean, I've got two minds. I work in music education, so I'm a little bit conflicted with it. When I was studying, I don't think it's as good as it is today. I think things really have changed over the past 10, 15 years because they had to. And it was more being taught what people thought you needed to know rather than what you actually needed to know to work with people and capture good recordings. And I think it's those kind of things that I learned in that space, like working with people, how to make people be relaxed, how to get a good performance out of somebody. It's not about having the best microphone or the most expensive preamp, because at that point I had no money to spend on those kind of things. I just had a bare bones setup, had a 24 channel desk, a handful of mics, and it was like, you've got to make this sound good.
Well, that's a pretty good start though on on the equipment front.
It's primitive compared to what I've had now. I mean, it's a little bit more than a 4-track. I think what was helpful at that point, when I was at university, one of my good friends left after the first year. He got an opportunity to work in a big studio down south, and he left. So I kind of had that link between me and him whilst I was at university, but that also meant that I was starting to learn about pieces of equipment that I didn't have access to. But then when I had this studio, it's like, right, I've got a load of gear I can sell you. I was like, come on, I'll have that off you. So it wasn't a bad setup, but like I say, quite primitive compared to the kind of things got access to now.
That lasted for, you said 4, 5 years.
About 4 or 5 years I was there, yeah. Again, I was young. I just wanted a space where I could make music and record people. The building was far from perfect. It flooded whenever it was the winter. We had little electric heaters to keep people warm. It wasn't uncommon to be tracking in December with your hood up on your hoodie and a scarf on and fingerless gloves. But there was something about that place. And there's still a few people. I mean, still a few people I work with now. Work with who are recording that studio. It's still a talking point. Like, it was such an amazing place, even though it was far from perfect and a little bit rough around the edges.
What was the cause of you moving on from that space?
I just got to a point where I'd started to outgrow that space. Bands were starting to come and record with me from outside of town, and I was like, I think now's the time to kind of take the plunge and move into a bigger space. So I got out of the farm, again, searched around for units. I was like, it's now time to kind of step up my game, get somewhere that's a little bit more impressive, and mainly wanted a bigger live room so I could get better drum sounds. and managed to find a place. And this was summertime. Went in there, bought all the materials, dropped all of the materials in to the building, and then I had to leave, I think, for 6 weeks. In summer, I do a little bit of tour work and disappeared to do some festivals, 6 weeks. I came back and the agents had not told me that there was a tap dancing school in the building connected to it. And when I got in there, all you could hear was tap, tap, tap all day long. And the issue was, like, this noise was going into the building. There was no way of building anything that would get rid of that noise because it's being the transmission was through all of the walls, all of the bricks. So I was like, I've got a bit of a problem here. I've just spent all of my savings on these materials. I've now signed into, I think it was a 5-year lease. At this point, I was still fairly young. This has been about 25, 26. And to be honest, it was a little bit scary. My parents really helped out. My dad's quite good with this stuff. He's like, we're going to have to take some legal action. Because I went to the agents. They're like, you've signed a lease. You're stuck with this place now for 5 years. And I was like, look, I can't run my business from here. I'm like, doesn't matter. You've signed a lease. So you're kind of locked in. You've got to pay for it for the next 5 years. They made a little bit of a mistake with that lease because they wrote in there that it was for use as a recording studio. So as soon as I took that to court, because of those words, it was for use as a recording studio, it wasn't usable. So I managed to get out of the lease, get my rent back for the couple of months that I had it, and then that's when I then moved into a commercial space. So that was a bit of a hairy time. I thought, actually, I might be getting out of audio here from no fault of my own. I'd signed this lease, like thinking I was going to come back and build this studio and start working in this new space that I planned out myself, and it wasn't to be. But like I say, fortunately, managed to get out of that. And then the search started again, and I managed to find a commercial studio that had come up for rent. The guy who had it was moving on.
Pre-existing studio?
Yep, so it had already been built out. I could move straight in, control room, live room, and it was in a rehearsal complex. So there were also 10 practice rooms there, I think, as well. So it was really lucky that that came up. But then it's kind of like, was this studio meant to fold like this? Because this has kind of just landed on my lap. I can move straight in and start working without all the hassle of having to build it out and start from the ground up.
What did you do with those materials that you bought for the tap dancing building?
Sold them for about a quarter of the price. I just had to get them gone. So it was, like I say, it was a very testing time. Like at that point, like there were days where I thought, this is it. I'm going to just do something else. It was really demoralizing. But I mean, it's something that I wouldn't fall for again. I mean, fortunately, I'm never going to have to go and rent a building like that again, hopefully.
What changed your mind? What made you decide to stay in the business after that experience?
I've just got no desire to do anything else. I mean, I felt demoralized because of the situation, but as you know, there's something in you when you do this. Like, if you're going to do music, you're going to do music. Someone told me that years ago, and it goes round in my head over and over again. If this is what you're destined to do, you'll do whatever you can to carry on doing it. Some days you're like, actually, I've had enough of this. I want to try something else. And then you wake up the next day, it's like, I don't want to do anything else. That was just a little blip.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to be checked like that and be tested like that too, to be able to get a little wiser about situations like, those business decisions. And I wonder if the agent like knew, like, oh shit, it's really hard to rent this place out because of the tap dancing thing.
Well, what was interesting about it, because, like I said, I'm from the Isle of Man, so when I started talking to people about this building, apparently it had been a recording studio years and years ago, and it was run by a load of local punks. So I think the agent was probably just, they're not going to know what's required for a recording studio. Like, this was used maybe 10, 15 years for a studio. That's absolutely fine. The problem was when I said to them, look, this isn't suitable, then they were like, "Nope, you're stuck in this contract," rather than trying to look for a solution. 'Cause at that point, I was like, "Look, find me another building. You've got plenty of other buildings on your books. Like, I've got the materials. I can go somewhere else. I just need somewhere that I can record."
Did that involve like you showing up to court?
It was meant to, and again, that was something I was a little bit worried about. But the day of the court hearing, I got a call from the court to say they'd given in and they're like they were going to give the money back. I think, well, they had been advised by the judge because of the wording of the contract. There wasn't really any point in going any further.
Ah, okay, great. What a victorious moment for you.
Oh, it's amazing.
So you get into this pre-made space
hmm
and it's got some rehearsal rooms attached to it. Tell me
hmm
about your time there. How did that go?
So that place, absolutely loved being there. Um, Up until being there, I kind of been a bit of a niche. I'd always worked with these heavier bands, and I was in kind of this pocket of UK hardcore bands that I'd worked with for 4 or 5 years, and they were they kept me busy. Like, I can't complain. Like, I was always recording, but I was just kind of in that world. Being in this new place, all of a sudden, it brought a load of new artists to me that I didn't know about me, and I didn't know about them. So I started to work with different kind of bands, and I'd got clients on my doorstep, which I'd never had before. Before, I'd had to go out and kind of talk to people at gigs. And for the first few years, it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I was like, come on, let's just record as much as we can. Um, but then with that place, after a while, I was like, actually, I'm not working with as many bands that I love working with anymore. Like, it's great that I'm getting to work on music, but these are people who are coming through the door. It's not people who are coming here to record with me anymore like they were at the old place. Um, so again, that place, incredible. But then I started to kind of reevaluate what was going on again. I was like, for me to get some enjoyment, not that I wasn't getting any enjoyment out of it, that's probably the wrong thing to say, because I wouldn't have wanted to do anything else, but there weren't projects that I was as invested in as I was in the barn, over probably 2 or 3 years, because we were just going through all of these bands that were coming and practicing, like, we'll record, go, and it turned into a bit of a kind of factory, I guess, which again was great for building skills, because I was always dealing with different styles of music, different types of people, and that kind of makes you a better engineer. But I was like, I'm not as invested in this as I used to be. And
Yeah.
then I ended up, that's when we started thinking about this place. Obviously, it's chasing rent every month. It's like, these people that I'm working with, I love working on the music, but I want to be invested in the projects. Like, I really want to be working with people that I love their music. They're not just recording here because it's a nice studio. Like, they want to work with me as well.
Was a lot of that due to the proximity of the rehearsal spaces?
Lots of bands coming through from the rehearsal spaces, because this was in like a big town as well. You got walk-in business, which was something I'd never had before, and I
Wow.
talked to lots of people like, walk-in business, what's this? But round that area, there was like a big rap scene at the time, so I'd get lots of walk-ins with rap sessions, which I'd take. So like, at that point, it's just like, let's record everybody. And for the first like 3, 4 years, it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Like I say, it got to a point where I was like, this isn't sustainable. And I started to lose the enjoyment for it. I think that's probably more what it was. It wasn't sustainable, the amount that I was working, because I was just like, come on, let's get in, let's record it. And I'd always find space for someone to record. I'd never think about, right, it's time to go home now. Like, I need to sleep or have a day off.
How long were you there?
5 years, I think I was in that place. So quite a while. And then the rent went up. Obviously, there's this really heavy workload that I wasn't getting as much out of as I did before. And I was like, it's time to kind of reevaluate now. And at that point, I had an assistant, and I said to him, look, I'm going to be leaving. If you want to take the studio on, you can do. But he knew what it was like, 'cause he'd been in there in sessions. I was like, it's hard work, but if you want it, then you can have it. He took over the studio. I walked away and then went freelance for a few years whilst we started planning this place and building this place. But there was a big gap in between leaving there and building this. It was meant to be a year or two, and I think it's probably about 6 or 7 years that I was freelancing, working out of other studios.
Your financial outlook and your approach to money throughout the years, did you go through a period of struggle with that? And have you arrived yet at a workable model for yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I with this place, I'm comfortable now, and I can sleep at night and have and I'm happy. In some of these other studios, that has not been the case. Like, and some of that has been bought on by myself. When I was younger, I saw the gear. People would give me credit cards, and I'd just go and buy things on credit. Which I'd tell anybody now: do not buy audio equipment on credit. It does not make you any more money, and you've got to pay it off. It's not free money. When I moved into that commercial space, I got it into my head that I needed a Pro Tools HD rig. Up until then, I was just using normal vanilla Pro Tools. So I put a Pro Tools HD rig on a credit card, and it took me years to pay that off. And I wish I'd had someone at the time to say, look, this is ridiculous. You do not need this to record music. What you're recording on is absolutely fine. If I'd have known that I was going to get these customers coming through from the practice rooms, then I may not have done that. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now I'd never buy gear on credit. Money needs to be in the bank, and then you can buy it. If the money's not in the bank, then
You
you have
can't
to
buy
wait
it.
until it is. Yeah, as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Essentially, all we need today to record or to mix is a laptop. Everything else is just a luxury.
Yeah, it's times have changed. You know, all the Pro Tools rigs and loans I have been through, and yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure, and I bring this up because I'm sure it's going to be on the minds of a lot of people with the fires in Los Angeles that are taking place. The amount of loss that's taken place is going to force a lot of audio professionals to rebuild, and I'm sure that their mindset of what they want to buy and or need to buy is different. I'm sure a lot of them have gone through a maturing process and will now say, actually, I don't need all this stuff that I used to have. I just need to replace, some key components that make running a studio or running a recording business or mixing or whatever, achievable for less money.
Yeah, totally achievable. So like I say, I'm a firm believer that all you need is a computer and some headphones, and you can get on and start creating and make music, maybe an audio interface of some variety.
Yeah.
We really don't need anything else. I mean, I'm an absolute gearhead, but I don't need this stuff. It's just nice to have in a session. Sometimes it's inspiring and it helps the process a little bit, but is it essential? Definitely not.
Now that you have your place there at your home, I'm sure you've acquired a lot of gear over the years. What's the criteria for you when it comes to buying a piece of gear nowadays?
If I think it's something that's going to be inspiring to me in a session, if I'm recording with someone, or if it's something that I find exciting. So like I say, I'm under no impression like I've got a fair bit of outboard, but I'm under no impression that I need this or it's required. Like, I do this because I love it and it's fun. I love gear and I love music. So just having those things to play with sometimes make a session a bit more fun or a mix a bit more fun. Obviously, I have people here recording as well. So I'm also always looking for things that are going to inspire bands or are going to give them a different option for a record that we're making. So I guess my criteria is something that's going to inspire something different in a session or just makes it a little more fun to record.
Do outside engineers rent your space?
No, this one's just to place me. I've had a couple of friends that have come and used the place
Mhm.
when they've needed a spot, but this is just for me.
You 100% focus on music. Do you do any other kind of audio work?
Just totally music based. So outside of the studio, I do little bits of other work. So, as I mentioned earlier, I do deliver on a music production program here, and in the summer, I do a little bit of live work, a little bit of tour work. So, I sometimes run monitors, done a little bit of tour managing. There's a few bits and pieces like go and record festivals as well, but I'm predominantly a studio guy. But it's nice to get out and see different things and meet new people sometimes. So, I always, when an opportunity arises to do something else, then I'm always up for it if it's something within my skill set.
How do you get your clients?
It's always been word of mouth, but majority of my clients is returning business, people that I've recorded with over the years and kind of on that EP or album cycle. I'm not recording the world's biggest bands, but I'm recording bands that are making music, that music's getting listened to, and they want to record. I want to record them, and kind of just the circle of the studio where we're on that cycle. And then um, I guess as bands break up, then it's that word of mouth thing. They tell someone else they're playing a show with or gone on tour with, look, this guy did our record. They like it and then reach out. I've never been massive on promoting, kind of like, how do I explain this? Like promoting the studio as such. I've been more about promote promote myself as kind of meeting people, networking more than like here's a flyer for the studio and a poster. That's not how the music world works. It's who you know and people getting on with you.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing for people. It's like, well, do they promote their studio or do they promote themselves to get the work? And I feel that it's the personal thing. People want to work with people.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I've tussled with over the years because obviously I kind of see myself as someone that I hope the bands that I work with like working with me, but like I'm kind of promoting myself. But because I've had these commercial spaces, people know my studio as the name. So when we did this, I was like, do I just scrap the name of the studio and just go under my own name? And it's like people kind of know what this when they see like loud noise production around here, they kind of know what I do and the kind of bands that I work with. Is like, and you're getting rid of all of these years of work. So it was a bit of a hard one to weigh up, but we've kept the studio name. I've kept that going.
Do you have a philosophy in how you handle clients? Do you have an approach that you feel works as far as the care and feeding of clients and making sure that they come back?
Yeah, I mean, my approach is like I'm not really someone who's very domineering in a session. Like everything is kind of artist led, and I'm there to support them. So I'm never going to tear someone down or say, you've got to do this, we've got to do that. Like I always let bands lead it and then obviously I can guide them to get them to where they want to be. But I'm big on people being comfortable and like you've got to be comfortable in the space. Like if we're gonna record and it takes 2 hours sitting about having a coffee, having a chat about what you've been doing over the past few weeks before we get into a session, then that's what we'll do. Like I want people to be comfortable, and I think that's how you get the best out of people.
Is the studio run by the hour or by the day?
I do it on a day rate here, because I don't have well, so I don't have overheads, obviously, there's electric and all of that, but because there's no other overheads, I can be a little bit more flexible on time. I know how much I need to make a day, and if it means running over an hour or two because we've been chatting or having a coffee, then that's cool by me. Like, I'm here to make an amazing record with you. Like, I'm not here to clock watch.
Do you have accommodations for people to stay at your house, or is that not part of the business equation?
No, that's not part
Okay.
of the business equation at the moment. That
Okay.
may be something in the future. We do have room where we could potentially have something that's a little more residential, but at the moment, not just yet. Me more building. I've still not recovered from the studio.
It takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, I feel like I aged 10 years in those a couple of years building, and
Yeah.
kind of looking back at those pictures and videos, I was thinking, how did we do this?
But the great thing is once you do it, it's done and it's yours and it's something that you will have for, assuming that you stay there for years to come, into your old age.
Oh yeah, every day I walk down here, like it's a pinch me moment. Like I say, I've worked in some great studios, but I've never felt as comfortable as I have in this place. And it helps that it also sounds great. I can't believe that it's mine.
Did it end up costing much more than you thought it would cost?
Of course, it's a studio. So, yeah, we did go over budget, but when you kind of break that down against the amount that I was paying in leases for other buildings and the amount I was paying in dry hire, it'll pretty much pay for itself in under 10 years, I think we worked it out to be. And it'd be the equivalent of paying a lease like I was paying before over a 10-year period. So for me, I'd rather be paying off something of my own than paying off someone else's building or someone else's mortgage.
You have a website, of course. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and everybody can come and check that out. You know, as the show goes on, I develop more and more friends and connections there in the UK, and I'm glad that I could add you to that list, and hopefully we can connect in person in the future.
I'd love to hang out at some point. If ever you're over here, you're always welcome to come and have a look, and coffee machine is always on.
Oh, you had me at coffee. Hey, great to talk with you, Owen. Thanks so much for making time for me. I appreciate it.
You too, Matt. Thanks for having me on the show.
You got it. Take care.